first speaker tonight, talking about the federal results of the election, is our co-facilitator, Alan Journet, and I'll pass her right away.
Thanks very much indeed, Daniel. When we first planned on this program, I had no idea how short the straw was that I pulled. You'll understand what I mean by that. Before I say a couple of words about what we need to be doing at the federal level, I just want to catch you up on stuff. Some of you might well know some of these things. I'm going to refer to two groups of people. One I will be referring to as the Climate Denier Caucus, and the other the Climate Conscious Caucus, and I think you'll figure out who I'm meaning by those terms, because we're non-partisan. The Climate Denier Caucus, as you probably remember, scored 312 electoral college votes, while the Climate Conscious Caucus scored only 226. Now that sounds like a major difference. On the other hand, when you look at the popular vote, and I only just realized this recently, the Climate Denier Caucus is under 50% of the popular vote and is only ahead of the Climate Consciousness Caucus by 1.6%. So we can hardly call that a mandate. Before I say anything else, I do want to do one thing very quickly. Anybody been watching Energy Horizons? Say hi to Keegan.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, you're welcome. Wonderful series. If you haven't been watching, you can still catch it. It's streaming on the Southern Oregon PBS. Of course, coming down to the Senate, the Climate Conscious Caucus now has only 47 seats, while the Climate Denier Caucus has 53. That's a change from 51 to 49 in the currently ending session. Back in the House, things are a little different. The Climate Denier Caucus currently has 219, and the Climate Conscious Caucus 213. Out of the total of 435 seats, there are 4 still undecided. I think it's down to 3 because one of them, the Democrat in the Climate Conscious candidate in California, is 13th, I think it is, has declared victory. So it looks as though that is going to end up at something like 221 to 215 for the climate deniers, but that's only a majority of 3, and then the 3 of those are not even going to be there because one was Matt Gaetz, and the other 2 have been nominated for cabinet positions, so they're going to be down by 3. So we might end up with just something like a 217 to 215 arrangement. And interestingly, it was 220 to 212, so actually the Climate Conscious Caucus has actually potentially picked up a seat or 2. So things aren't too bad in the House, and of course the Climate Denier Caucus can never manage to do anything. Okay, what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we have to do is recognize that with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden-Harris administration actually turned out to be one of the most, if not the most, climate-friendly administrations on record. Of course, we're going to be addressing climate change for a short period of time anyway. DSmog blog executive editor Brendan DeMel commented, if you're not familiar with the DSmog blog, have a look for it. It's a very worthwhile website. Donald Trump's push to drill, deregulate, and destroy environmental safeguards threatens to move climate progress back decades, which is an unfortunately realistic evaluation. Now, this is a little comment from me. We don't know if it's too late to avert the climate trajectory we are currently following sufficient to protect life on the planet as we know it, especially now. But we know that what the consequence of inaction would be, so we must assert and maintain optimism and do the best we can do, because the alternative is simply unacceptable. We have to do what we can do. One of the things that has been recommended by a group called Evergreen is that the current White House needs to try and Trump-proof all the climate gains that have been made. And there's been a few suggestions as to how they might do that. One is to finalize the Department of Energy's studies determining that liquefied natural gas exports are not in the public interest. And the reason for that is because the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has that a project must be in the public interest for it to be approved. And so if we can get the White House to declare LNG exports are not in the public interest, that should influence FERC. And they could reject the 5 remaining LNG export proposals. Another thing, of course, rapidly appoint fair judges. Approve state rules, especially California's vehicle standards and decarbonization programs. And finalize regulations where risk of congressional repeal is low. We have to promote state, local, and private climate leadership. States have always have had a substantial role to play in addressing the climate crisis. This is, of course, going to be even more important now and is possible in Oregon, as we will hear from Rep. Marsh in just a few moments. The White House should expedite approval of pending state policies, such as New York's congestion pricing program and California's vehicle and appliance standards. And look out for HB 9495. If you're not familiar with this one, it sounds like a reasonable bill. It actually passed the House. It is called the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act, which makes it sound like a pretty good thing. Unfortunately, what it would do is allow the Secretary of the Treasury to declare non-profit organizations, such as Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, supporters of terrorism, which would deny us non-profit status. That passed the House. It will not arrive in the Senate because Chuck Schumer, as I understand it, has declared it's not going to get a hearing. But be sure that the Climate Denier Caucus will be bringing this back as soon as they get control. So look out for a bill that looks like that and urge your representatives, particularly senators, to vote against it. Okay, I'm now going to introduce to you somebody that you know very well. We have been incredibly lucky in this area to have Jeff Gordon as our senator and Pat Marsh as our representative, because they are recognized throughout the state, particularly the legislature, as champions when it comes to climate and environmental issues. So I'm just going to pass the microphone to Pam, and she will then pass it on to Denise, who will talk about the county level. Because the Senate, the Oregon House is so important, Pam is the one who gets the fat time allowance.
Thank you, Alan. You know, when I left my house and it was dark and cold, I thought, who's going to come to this meeting at the library? And then I pulled into the back parking lot, and there were all these cars there, and I walk into this room, and there's all these spaces. And it's so reinforcing, because it's really just an indication of the passion and the nerve we're going to have in moving this work forward, despite whatever is happening on the federal level. Thank you all for being here. So the election was not the election that we wanted to see, and the outcome is certainly not the outcome that we wanted to see. I was elected first in 2016 on the night of the first Trump victory. And what we did during that next 4 years, 2 cycles in the legislative world, was to play defense. We figured out how to try to counter as best we could the repressive policies that were coming from the federal level. We passed environmental legislation to make it clear that Oregon has the right to legislate clean air, clean water. We legislated reproductive rights and made sure that abortion was protected. We passed policies to make sure that our citizens had some reasonable protections against deportation. So we did all that. The AG stepped up in a million different ways, filed cases and joined with other AGs from Democratic states all over the country to try to defend us against some of the policies that were coming out of that administration. And we survived. But I want to tell you, the last 4 years, when we didn't have to fight the federal government, have been much more fun. When we could actually just dive in and do the work in Oregon and not worry about attacks from the federal government. We didn't always have the federal government on our team over the last 4 years. They have lots to do, but sometimes we did. And it was such a blessing to have that partnership at the federal level. So now, 2024 feels like 2016, except we have a better idea of what might be coming and how easily the new president may be able to manipulate and implement policies that we are not going to like. And it's back to playing defense at the state level. Now, the good news here, and there is lots of good news here in Oregon, is that Oregon, while we did shift a little bit toward Trump, we stayed very strong in the Democratic category. And in fact, we advanced in our legislative majorities. I think we are the only state to have done that across the country. We actually now have 18 Democratic senators, added one, so there's a supermajority on the Senate side. We are on the verge, on the cusp of adding a 36th House member, Leslie Nunez, whose votes are being counted right now as we sit here in Woodburn. But we think with great confidence, actually, that Leslie will be our 36th member, so we'll have a supermajority on the House side too. So what does supermajority mean? Well, it depends on who you talk to. So technically, supermajority gives the Democrats the ability to pass tax votes because you need that supermajority to do that work. And we have enough votes on and of ourselves. The fact is that we will rarely use the supermajority powers because certainly we hope as we're putting together a transportation plan or other work that we have Republican partners, at least a few stepping in to support that work. But what the supermajority does give us, and this is really important, is the opportunity to pursue robust policies that not all of our members have to agree to. So for policies alone, we need 31 votes. With an extra 5 votes, and we're a diverse group, we Democrats, and some of us are for swing districts where they have to be particularly careful about what they vote for. We have some wiggle room, so we can still move forward with a robust agenda, and that is really important. Other very good news is that Dan Rayfield was elected Attorney General. Dan is a Democrat. I hope many of you voted for him. And he will be the person in that AG seat standing up for Oregon and defining the defense whenever we need to respond to something that's coming out of the presidential administration. So that's tremendously good news. So what are we going to do? Well, we in the Democratic caucus are going to stick to our agenda. We are going to do the work that's in front of us for the state of Oregon. That means taking on lots of big issues like stabilizing our K-12 schools. It means adjusting our shelter system so that it's a resilient system and enduring for the years to come. It means building more houses. It means taking on a number of different issues. And it absolutely means continuing to focus on the climate crisis. We may not have support from the federal government for doing that. In fact, we can assume we will not have support from the federal government for doing that. We can also probably predict that there will be some definitive actions at the federal government that actually undermine our work on climate here in Oregon and across the country. But we can continue to do the work, and we will do that. So let me just tell you some of the things that are being keyed up for next session. You may have read that the Climate Protection Program has been reinstated by the Department of Environmental Quality. A few years ago, roll back time, we tried to pass something called cap and trade, which was a climate strategy to phase out fossil fuels. We weren't successful in that because the Republicans walked out twice to deter that legislation. So instead, we shifted. The then Governor Brown, put into effect executive orders that took on the work in a different way. And one of the pieces of that work was to set up the Climate Protection Program within the Department of Environmental Quality, which will serve to effectively phase out the use of fossil fuels over time. It is different than a cap and trade, but it has a lot of the same parallel qualities. I said at the top of this that it was reinstated. It had been pulled out of operation for a while because there was a court case challenging some of the processes that had been used to develop and implement the program. So we started over. DEQ has spent the last year getting that program into place, and now it is into place, and we'll move forward with it. From the legislative point of view, what we have to make sure is that there's no undermining of that program in the legislature. And that could be an issue. So stay tuned on that front because we will need your support. I have a piece of legislation that is going to address the very large energy users, also known as the data centers and crypto mining. If you're reading about this, you know that those energy users have enormous projected electricity needs over the next few years. The kind of need that we've not forecasted until just the last couple of years when the situation has become clear. So we need to make sure, as we scramble around, try to figure out where we're going to come up with power for these folks, how they should be involved in actually paying for the power that they need. Right now, the PUC and the utilities, which serve the big users, don't have the tools they need to make sure that all costs are placed on the big users. So I have a bill that I've been working with Climate Solutions and the Citizens Utility Board that will make sure that data centers, crypto mining, anybody else in that category are simply paying the cost of what they need. Seems like a pretty straightforward consumer protection to me. We will be looking at wildfire costs. Jeff Golden, my partner in crime here, has been deeply involved in this issue, although all of us have been pulled in. We are seeing wildfire as a result of accelerating climate conditions on a regular basis. This summer, not many of those fires were near us, although we did have an early season fire in the Applegate. And it was the most costly wildfire season that we've ever had. 2 million acres burned. The good news there is only 50 homes were burned, so very different quality of fires than we had in 2020, but still very expensive. The legislature has actually announced today it's going to have a special session in 2 weeks just to look at how we are going to pay the cost of wildfire that were accumulated during this wildfire season, close to $200 million. So we've got to come together in a special session to do that. The good news of that special session is that I think it will give us special impetus as we go into the regular session to figure out how we are going to pay not only for suppression, which is very costly, but also for the good, solid mitigation work, the defensible space. I have a bill that would implement a home hardening program that I'm going to introduce next year. We need to invest in that part of it because if we do a good job on mitigation, it will make us safer when we get to the point of actually having fire and potentially reduce suppression costs as we go along. We are going to have some bills around microgrids. Microgrids enable local communities to have some of their own resilience by generating their own power. There are some sort of bureaucratic limitations on the ability of providers to move forward with microgrids. So we have a bill in the House Energy and Environment Committee that will take that on. So we're going to keep doing the work. Now, the challenge is that we may also have to pivot to respond to anything that comes down to the federal level. And what we really hope is that a lot of the incentives that we are making very good use of here in Oregon through the IRA, the Infrastructure Act, remain in place. And that you've read lots of speculation about what a Trump administration might do on that front. Lots of it is hopeful because it turns out that red states actually would love to have clean manufacturing facilities as well as blue states. So to the extent that those benefits are flowing to red states and the people who represent those red states recognize that, we may get away with keeping much or all of that infrastructure money that's been passed, but it's a day-to-day thing. You know as much as I do, we're all reading the newspaper and trying to read between the lines of the newspaper to figure out what might be going on. So what does this all mean for what I hope you will do? While I said the legislature and the state is focused on continuing our climate agenda, the fact is there will be many distractions because and you have to keep focusing. You have to keep focusing when the distractions come forward. But it's going to be hard, and money will have to flow likely to things like legal counseling for people who are DACA recipients and don't know what's going to happen to them, or stepping up for Medicaid gaps that might be created. We just don't know. So it is going to be more important than ever that advocates really show up and encourage all of us to continue to stay the course. because there will be more distractions, and without special attention, it will be easy for climate and climate work to shift to the bottom of the agenda and to not be funded in the way that we would like to see it funded. We do have a state budget that looks all right. We got a budget forecast update last week. Looked a little better than it had been, but to be clear, we have so many expenses, as in K-12 schools, as in wildfire expenses, as in the need to sustain our shelter system, transportation, you know it all. So we'll also have to advocate hard to get money placed into some of our enduring climate programs. For example, in 2021, when we passed 100% clean, we set up the Community Renewable Grant Program, which has funded projects all over the Rogue Valley. We've actually gotten disproportionate investment from that program. And I got another $20 million in that program 2 years ago, but that's just an example of the programs that we need to keep going so that they continue to do good work, which means that we're going to have to make a case for diverting very precious pennies to climate programs. So that's what I know so far. I'm happy to answer any questions either. I think we have a Q&A period or later more informally. And again, I just can't thank you enough for showing up and for maintaining the focus and the passion that you have for all of this.
Thank you, Kathleen.
This is nice to see everybody here tonight. Yes, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about county. And I know we had a very disappointing election all the way around in so many ways. I thought that it would be a lot closer. In fact, thought we had a good shot at it. What ended up happening here is Jackson County took a shift to the right, along with so did the nation. But here, we actually have seen just the initial numbers. We don't have the precinct level data yet, but we had over 7,000 more Republicans vote than Democrats in Jackson County. Now, there are more Republicans than Democrats in Jackson County, but they voted at a higher rate and earlier than Democrats. So those are tough odds to overcome. We were hoping for more of a little blue wave, but we ended up with a red tsunami. And so what we have one new commissioner, that's Randy Spiracino. He is, I don't know what the position is on climate because it's never really talked about. So I assume on the side of the climate deniers, but hopefully, we can push that issue because, again, there's a lot of people who think differently from the current commission that's very limited in scope. It's doesn't have a big difference of opinion. Everybody's pretty much in lockstep in one direction. And we just don't have representation, and that just isn't working. And we know it's not working. It's just not fair. So the other thing I want to say about Josephine County. Josephine County, they had 2 seats up for election, and they went even further to the right with their 2 seats. One that's still in is John West, and he is up for a recall vote in December, I think is when they're going to vote for that. So big lurch to the right for both Jackson County and Josephine County, and it looks like the nation as a whole for right now. Of course, we know that things swing, so don't be discouraged. One thing that I'm seeing, it's okay to be discouraged. Quite okay. It's understandable. But I am really encouraged to see how it's bringing people together. We are paying attention, we're concerned, people are ready to get out and do some work to bring it back together. Now I think as far as what does this mean at the county level, what I wanted to do if I had been elected is to, first of all, start to put the advisory committees back in place. There are a number of advisory committees for the county, and they really aren't being valued at this point. One of them that was discontinued a number of years ago was the Natural Resources Advisory Committee. And there may be a better name for that now, you know, something like Climate and Environmental Advisory Committee. Well, that doesn't look like that's really going to happen right now. However, you know, I think that we have to remember, you know, we can't wait. We can't wait until we get a seat on the commission. We can't wait till we get a majority on the commission. We can't wait till we get 5 people on the commission. We have to remember that we actually have the power. Those people report to us. You know, we have a lot more power than we think we do or that we remember, and we need to start exercising that. So what I would like to say for this advisory group that probably isn't going to be formed by the county, we have a county group here in Stockton, and you know it needs to grow. It needs to grow, and I also wanted to, if elected, to have to get started on the climate action plan for Jackson County. Some of the other cities here have the climate action plan. County needs to do it. That's not really being discussed. We are watching the meetings and seeing what's going on. So I would throw out there as a possibility that perhaps this county SOCAN group could actually become an advisory committee to start to develop that climate action plan for the county and make recommendations and start to do that work. And you know, it's kind of interesting with county, I'm seeing it already with the animal shelter, is if we start taking action and start taking things into our own hands and get active, county, they don't want us to do that. They want to be in charge and in control, so they start to do things. So I think that's what we need to do, is to start to do the work that needs to be done. Climate can't wait. We can't wait. There's no need to wait. So if we can get this started, it's a very, very possible that county will get involved with it and become more of a partner. I think that, you know, we're all kind of not knowing what to do. We're thinking, we've got to resist, we've got to fight back. You know, I've been thinking about that a lot. For me, I want to really be, I don't want to put my energy into fighting all the time. I want to put it for fighting for positive change. For fighting for positive change, not just resisting. I don't want to just play defense. We have to play defense. Sometimes we have to play defense, but let's, you know, also remember that we can play offense. And so take that, you know, and know that, like, if it's Citizens for Jackson County, we need to keep paying attention to what's going on. People have been learning more through this process and over time about what's going on with the county. And one of the things that I ran on was transparency and accountability. And that is just as important now as ever. And just because we don't have a seat at the table doesn't mean we can't demand transparency and accountability. And so if that means to continue to watch the meetings and to continue to educate people about what's going on in the meetings, to show up, to ask questions, to call. Now we can give, you know, Randy's new. We can put some pressure on him because, you know, we want these things. We need to ask for those things. You know, let's not just wait and be passive or defensive. Let's get on this. So the animal shelter is an example. You know, nothing was happening with the animal shelter. We were so frustrated. And then we start saying, we're going to do the work. We're going to get an animal shelter. We're going to do this. And now all of a sudden at the meeting Thursday, Danny comes like, we got a plan for an animal shelter. And so we want to keep working on that. But the part that didn't happen is, well, we got the plan, the one-man plan, and we got the rubber stamps, all 3, but there was no public input. Again, no public input. And that's what we can't sit back and allow that to just happen without our input, because we can do so much better, and we all know that. So anyway, don't be too discouraged, because after the holidays we got to get busy and try to continue pushing in the right direction. So I want to turn it over to Kathy Conway, the other co-facilitator for SOCAN, to talk about local issues.
So my task is to talk about what's going on locally, and as I put this together, I was quite surprised at what we're doing, and I hope you will be too. What I'm going to do, the next one, is talk about some places where we have climate action teams and what's happening there, and then I'll talk about a few areas where there's interest but we don't have anything going on. So in Ashland first, in 2017, the Climate Energy Action Plan was passed, and SOCAN was involved in that development. We're very proud to be part of that. Following that, the Ashland Climate and Environment Policy Advisory Committee was established, so that's a city advisory committee. And then recently, the Rural Climate Youth Protectors developed what's now called the Ashland Climate and Clean Air Ordinance that they proposed, went to council. Council gave it to the Ashland Climate and Environment Advisory Policy Committee, and it's currently waiting for the attorney to review it. So we're hoping that's going to happen quickly. So looking at that action that's already happened in Ashland, and looking at the election, it appears that we still have strong support for climate action by the mayor and also by the council. So that's held in Ashland. But we are learning more and more that community support is needed to make things happen. Going on to Talent, Talent developed a clean energy action plan, and then they integrated that into their comprehensive plan. Recently, they passed the Clean Energy and Clean Air Resolution. It was supported by Together for Talent, which is a talent committee, and also by SOCAN's Talent Climate Action Team. And the focus there is on supporting education to let Talent residents know what ways they can save money on energy bills by upgrading to efficient electric appliances. So again, happening because of community pushing things. Following the election, Talent held really strong, with strong support to work towards climate action goals, so we're in really good shape with Talent. And then Talent Climate Action Team is going to go forward with working with Together for Talent to develop more educational information to support that resolution that was passed. In Medford, they developed the Climate Change Adaptation and Resilience Plan, and this one's a little different. It was developed by city staff, and the Medford Climate Action Team was consulted as they developed that plan. The planning director took the lead in writing and developing support for the document, but unfortunately he has moved to another job, so he's resigned, and the hiring is in process for the new planning director, and that's not been completed yet. So that's going to be key to what's going to happen with that Medford plan. And in terms of the election, it's not clear how much support there's going to be by the new mayor and the council for climate action in Medford, which means community action is really, really important. Grants Pass established the Sustainability and Energy Task Force, and that was a task force that was created by the council. That task force then developed the Sustainability Energy Action Plan for Grants Pass. So some people don't know this has been going on in Grants Pass. And then within that plan was the establishment of the Grants Pass Sustainability Advisory Committee, and they were charged with implementing their action plan. So it was set into motion how to go forward with action, which was really smart. Also, the people that helped develop that plan knew that having financial incentives for things was going to be the way to get things to happen in that community. Very wisely developed the way they put it together. Now, Grants Pass election, the mayor and the major leaders who started the development of the action plan were not reelected. It was based on another issue, but they all were voted out. So what we have in Grants Pass is we have climate-friendly representatives on the Sustainability and Energy Action Advisory Committee. And the hope is that they will be able to focus on the cost savings that result from investments in renewable energy and in other ways, and that action will go forward because of that's been put in place. We think that Grants Pass, which has a climate action team, needs to, we need to work to develop that team because the people on those committees are going to need more support than they've needed in the past. And so that's going to be the focus in the Grants Pass area. The last one that I have that we have established is the coastal group. And this one's a little different. Bill Gorham, who's part of SOCAN and on the board, is the leader of the group. And they're focusing on advocating for fact and evidence-based decision-making with respect to the proposed floating offshore wind projects. So their focus is just right now on offshore wind. Some things have happened. If you have listened to this in the news, there's Oregon State Sea Grant Office has started working to support education events by Oregon State faculty, working on educating people about the offshore wind. And a new coalition is formed. It's called the Coalition for Common Ground, that has some of the people that were opposing the previous proposals, but now they're coming together to talk, to work out differences, and to educate people. So Bill is very actively engaged in that. Anybody who's interested in offshore wind, you don't have to live on the coast. A lot of the meetings they have are virtual meetings, and so you could be actively engaged if you're interested in this topic. We don't know what impact the election is going to have on this, and so we're waiting to see. So those are the places where we have active teams, and we have potential teams in some other places. Jacksonville, we've had a team that's done a little bit of work, and they're reorganizing in 2025. The impact of the election on that group, we're not sure if that's going to have an impact or not. Phoenix in the past has not had a group. It's not been a place where things have been happening. But with the election of a new mayor and 3 members on council that are going to be much more sensitive to climate, we are really encouraged that we might have some things that we can start happening in Phoenix. Gold Hill, we've had some interest in the community. There's one person on the council who's supportive, who was reelected, so that's positive for Gold Hill. Central Point, we've had some interest by people in the community, and we're not sure how the election is going to impact that group. So a lot of people I've seen since the election are ready to do something. And like Denise said, you get past your despair or you deal with it, and action is where people are going. So I'd like to encourage you to think about taking action in our valley. You know, we've got lots of opportunities. So in summary, I'd like to say, except for Grants Pass, the level of support after the election is either the same as it was or it's increased. So I think we did fairly well. Generally, it's not the councils that lead on climate action. It's potentially the staff, but more than anything, it's the community. So that's where our power is getting together and moving things forward. The extent in which cities behave in a climate-friendly manner is dependent upon us. That's where we are. So what I have tonight in the back is there's some stand-up things with a sign up beside them. Those are the places where there are active climate action teams, if you're interested in those communities. And then there's some sheets for other communities where we don't have a group. And if you're in a community that's not there, write your name down and put what community you're in. And I added one for county. So if you're interested in action in the county, there's a sheet back there. So I encourage you to think about it. Working with other people who are concerned to take action is one of the strongest things we can do. All right.
So this is our last page. But the last thing I want to leave everyone with is, again, that sense of community is going to be vital. So I can see everyone's faces in here, and I'm so glad that you all made it to join us and support us. I hope you join our climate action teams. In particular, we're going to be doing a better job of really identifying what people are good at and matching your skills to what we need across the valley. So I encourage you to please sign up and let's find a role that fits you. Maybe that's writing, maybe that's art, maybe that's another form of expression, maybe that's protesting, maybe that's making city council comments, maybe that's recycling and composting and all of the other things that we can do to support our climate. So I appreciate it. It looks like someone wants to say something else in the microphone. Oh yeah, there's questions in there. Let's see, Q&A is going to be a little strange since our speakers are spread around the room, but...
We'll have them come up. Or actually, yeah, questions on the wireless and then responses.
Okay, can I get our speakers up here with me, please? I've got 2. I've got 3. I've got a reluctant 4. Okay. So that will be the question mic. This will be the question mic. That will be the answer mic. So do we have questions for our speakers?
Thank you. I have a question for Pam. It's not really directly regarding the climate, but I know that Oregon is supposed to be a sanctuary state. How is it on our local level? For instance, in Medford.
Well, we have passed legislation that says that law enforcement should not enable deportations of non-charged individuals. We expect that to be the law. I am sure people right now are going back and looking to see if there's more things that we should do, just in addition to what I am fairly confident is coming, which will be allocation of money to, again, help people with legal services. You know, the idea that everybody should be a citizen or have checked that off sort of belies the reality on the ground. It is very difficult to get through immigration. It takes a lot of focus. In some cases, it's not even possible. So we'll be putting supports and money into helping people to negotiate so that they get to safe status, whatever that is for them. And we'll be looking again at to make sure that we are not opening ourselves up to mass deportations in the way that we've heard them described by some of the people who circle around the president.
Hi, I also have a question for Pam. I'm wondering if you could talk more about the transportation package and the opportunity given difficulties with transportation funding to push for more climate-friendly transit. And I have an even more specific question, which is that bus service to Medford and Grants Pass that connects us to the rest of the state has been cut. It's no longer possible to take Greyhound from here to Portland, and I'm wondering if there's any opportunities to change that.
So the background is the state does a transportation planning document once every 8 years. We did it in 2017, the first year that I got elected. We are doing it again this year. There's been a group of bipartisan, bicameral legislators who have been traveling the state over the past summer. Some of you may have attended the gathering they put together at the expo to just try to get content from people. What do local governments want out of their transportation system? What do citizens want out of their transportation system? I attended that, I'm not on the group, but I attended that meeting and we heard a lot here in the Rogue Valley about alternatives to cars and trucks. We heard a lot about interest in trains, in buses, and making pedestrian and biking paths more accessible to people. Now, here's the rub. The rub is that our transportation system has really been financed primarily by fuel taxes over these years. So every time you buy a gallon of gas, you pay a little bit toward the state's transportation operation. The ODOT, the Department of Transportation, which runs our programming, is about $1 billion a cycle in the hole because some of us are driving electric vehicles and others of us are driving vehicles that get much higher fuel mileage. So we're just not buying as much gas. And when we're not buying as much gas, we're not accumulating those dollars that are going into supporting the transportation system. So this planning process that is underway now is going to have to look at some very fundamental questions about where money comes from and what kinds of projects we can do. What I can tell you at this point is that do not expect to see big new projects in the plan. In 2017, we did name some big projects, primarily in the north part of the state where the congestion is, around modernizing 205, which goes around the metro area, looking at the bridge across to Washington, looking at the Rose Quarter where there's a great deal of congestion when you come into the airport and across from Washington. Those projects, in some cases, are done. In other cases, we frankly ran out of money. There was an expectation we might use tolling. Tolling, when it came down to it, got a huge amount of pushback. So the upshot is this package will be conservative. It will be focused on maintenance. And I think there is every opportunity to make sure that we have support for alternative transportation in there, which will mean, including EV rebates. That will mean taking a good look at the privilege tax, which was a tax put on the sale of new cars, which has supported our EV programs, our EV rebate programs. Taking a good look at the very small payroll tax that has supported our smallest transit districts, including RBTD here in the Rogue Valley. We need to make those more robust. And I think there's interest in that. I mean, those things, when it comes down to it, are almost peripheral to the big transportation fund problem. Those projects can move forward and really help a lot of Oregonians without anything near the kind of money that we need to expand freeways and build bridges and do the big kind of projects. So I think there will be a lot of support. I also think anybody who drives a high mileage vehicle or an EV will expect to pay more because we have roads out there that have to be maintained. And even if you're not buying fuel, you're going to have to contribute to helping us to keep the transportation system together. And to the extent that the environmental community can recommend ideas for funding, we will have leverage to control the agenda. So that's what I've said for 6 months is think about how we're going to pay for it, because if you can go in with that in hand, you're going to have a lot better seat at the table when you start talking about what gets funded.
Can I add one comment? There is some talk now about replacing, the gas tax isn't doing it now, but there's some talk about doing a tire tax.
Thank you for the presentations. This has been really insightful. I have a question that's not like a super specific question, but more of just like, what are your thoughts on it? Right now, there's all this different speculation going around about what the future of specifically renewable energy is. Something I've been hearing from both articles all around, but some of my sources is that what they're expecting is maybe a bit of a winners and losers situation in the renewable energy space. Where right now the rhetoric seems to be softening on some renewables, but going really hard and critical on others, specifically with like electric vehicles and lithium batteries. you're seeing this support for the idea of doing more extraction and manufacturing more of those batteries here. In fact, the Thacker Pass mine in Nevada was started under the Trump administration. Like I said, it's not a super specific question, but I'm just curious what your thoughts on that kind of winners and losers philosophy are. Do you think that that's where it's going, or do you think that, what do you think, I guess is my question.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the generosity over here. The first thing I would say, the specific example you mentioned, Keegan, of lithium batteries, we have to recognize that although I'm always reluctant to put my faith in technology, that one of the benefits of technological advance is that there is a vast amount of research going on with batteries, and there are alternatives to lithium batteries which are being developed, and much as we are concerned about the hazards of lithium mining, I think the benefit of moving forward with electric vehicles is that I think that technology will take us beyond lithium. So we will have batteries that are not so hazardous in their manufacture. The bigger question that you're asking, yes, there are going to be winners and losers. And I think it's going to, my sense is it's going to be a function of the energy source that is the most economically beneficial is the one that is, those are the ones that are going to win. And they're probably going to be things like wind and solar, as you discussed in your program, geothermal. Hydrogen has a lot of potential, so long as it's manufactured the right way, not using methane or coal as the basis. So there are lots of choices, and I think what we have to do is try and encourage as many choices as we possibly can, and recognize, and I think you were doing this in Energy Horizons, and recognize that it's not necessarily going to be the same energy source in every location. Some places it'll be one, and some places it'll be another, and different uses will have different sources of energy. One thing that I am concerned about is the push towards nuclear, because I have been concerned about that for a long time, and I'm really hoping that we don't find ourselves sucked into nuclear energy. Anybody else?
Next question.
Thank you.
This is actually for you, Scott. Okay. Yeah, this is actually for you, Scott. As someone who has both friends and relatives that are facing deportation, I would like to get involved with Unite, but as you intimated pretty clearly, there's this law coming up that if it passes, Unite, among so many other groups, will be branded as terrorist organizations. And so I need to know more, I need to understand better some actual tactics to take to stop this damn bill from coming out. I mean, in terms of like, who do we need to lobby? How do we go about lobbying them? Things like that. I need, like I find you were a bit euphemistic about the way you said we need to keep an eye on this. Well, we need to do more than keep an eye on it. We need to battle it so it doesn't happen. So please help me understand tactically how we battle this. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I was being a little euphemistic as I don't have the answers quite yet. I think at the moment the best thing we can do is the director put out a call for like basic food and supplies and things, and that's where we start right now, is just making sure everyone's fed and housed. And then once we know how to fight back, then we'll share that information. I know that's not the perfect answer, but I hope it's the starting place.
Well, who do we lobby to vote against it? Oppose the bill. To oppose the bill.
Didn't you say it wasn't getting appreciated? I would add that, so have you heard of the group Indivisible?
Yes.
Indivisible is coming up again. It had a gathering just a couple days ago, and I think there were over 100 people there. After it started last time Trump was elected, and then kind of dwindled away to very a couple of people during the last 4 years, but now it's really resurging, and they're getting organized, and so they are coming up with calls to action and to how to call your congressman, when to call, and giving you some pointers on how to get involved in that way to make a difference. So I would look at that. What is it, indivisible.org?
Yeah, ORD2, indivisible.org.
ORD2, indivisible.
I also want to say that they'll probably be pushing on Bill Vance, our congressman. And I read someplace that he actually is against the mass deportations because, in his district, there are so many agricultural workers that we need, so he knows they'll be in trouble if they deport those.
Yeah, I think there are two different issues that we need to discuss here. One is that bill that I mentioned, House Bill 9495.
Yep.
That, in this session, is not going anywhere because Chuck Schumer's not going to bring it up in the Senate. But something like that will come back, and that's the one that I think you were referring to in part, which would designate nonprofits such as us, such as Unite, as supporting terrorists and therefore compromise our nonprofit status. And the other issue is the one which is, I think, near and dear to many of our hearts, and that's this whole idea of mass deportation. That hasn't started yet, but Dasha was talking about the fact that Cliff Bence seems to be opposed to that because he has so many undocumented farm workers. And I was just reading today that the paradox is that the red counties of California, which voted so strongly, the rural counties that voted so strongly for Trump, have something like 132,000 undocumented farm workers. And if Trump has his way, that's going to put all of those farmers that voted for Trump out of work, and it's going to ramp up inflation. So folks in rural areas, as Dasha mentioned in Cliff Bence, are probably, when the rubber hits the road, they're going to really come up in arms about this. Which is not to say we should just wait for the red counties to wake up, but this is not going to be easy, and we should certainly be ready to push back. Absolutely.
And I can add that for locally, Kathy Kizzy, who's part of Unite, contacted me, and I sent the notice out to others. I can share with anybody who's interested. So the first request was for food, because people, some of them don't have jobs right now, and so they need food. But the other thing they did during a previous Trump administration was they had sessions to help us understand how we could help people who might be in danger of being deported. And she mentioned that they will probably start having those again. So being aware that those are happening, generally held in the libraries. But if you're interested in that and you're not in a communication line where you'll get that, let me know and I can pass anything on that I get.
Can I just offer one thing here? That so when you were speaking about being action-oriented, who do you lobby? I would suggest that anyone in this room look up the app 5 Calls. So this is.
Thank you, I looked up it.
Yeah. So this is a mobile app. This is a desktop app. And I can look right now on HR 9495, which I did earlier this week, and it tells me the 3 updates that have happened since 11/14 and 11/15, 11/21, and on that day, that's when it passed 219 to 184. If you click on that, it'll tell you who voted and how they voted, right? So it also tells you at the bottom of every, it gives you different topics, right? So it could be climate action, it could be this bill, and then it'll go down and it'll tell you who to call. And it does for this bill, it says Jeff Merkley and Ron Wyden. And then you click on this to see your script, it'll tell you the number to call, the different offices to call, and this is just seriously like the one-stop shop for everything that you're interested in. If you're interested in action and who to lobby for what thing, it's right here.
Can
Thank you.
5 calls.
They have a phone app, not just a desktop.
Yeah, that's a mobile app
Yeah.
or the desktop app. So the number 5 and the word calls. So this is one of the best things I've found in a really long time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will be including that into the newsletter. It sounds like that's something we definitely should be doing.
Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing, and that is support those organizations. If they're declared an organization where they want to take their 501c3 status, that's going to be a legal battle. They're going to need funds to fight that legal battle. So that's another way that those who are able can take action right now. Start building their coffers. Get them ready for the fight ahead. So that's one way.
Hi, I just wanted to continue the conversation of Pam's response to Meg's question about the loss of income from transportation taxes. And my idea is to ask for the state police in particular to enforce fines on dumping because there's been so much more of it on the freeway. I commute a lot between here and Ashland and have just noticed an incredible difference and increase in trash. And so if we could generate income for transportation by penalizing that, that'd be one thing. And also I want to take a moment to encourage all of us and continue what Hogan said in that let's all be aware when we are spending money of where that money is going and if it aligns with our values. Thank you.
Thank you much. Being aware of time. You guys don't have to come up to me, but apparently that's the trend we've started.
We're followers here. Thanks very much, guys. My question is also for Pam. It is about the data centers. The data centers are obviously a very new thing to Oregon. We have seen natural resource extraction in the state for a long time be a part of just kind of our state identity. And in the past, we have instituted things like the OLCC Railroad Act, the ONC Railroad Act, the Oregon and Coos Bay Lands Railroad Act that allows the checkerboard pattern throughout Oregon to be logged. Some of that money goes back to districts that it's taken from. I heard you say that the plans currently aren't to subsidize those data centers from taxpayer dollars, but I'm curious if there are plans. As far as I've heard, it hasn't been a part of the conversation. I'm curious if there are different perceptions. If not, maybe why aren't they a part of the conversation? But yeah, I'm curious if we're planning on instituting any sort of legislation to, see funds from those data centers go back to counties like Beaverton, where those data centers are, being put in a weak way.
Well, it's a great, important question, and I'm not sure how we would have the data centers theoretically pay property taxes, although frankly we do a lot of economic incentives that allow them to forego much of their property tax. This is all in what we think about data centers. So to this point, we've thought technology and data centers were great. They talked to the county commissioners in Umatilla County, and they'll do everything they can to support the Amazon data center that's out there, and they think it is a great benefit to the community. There is a lot of production when they're being built. There are really not a lot of full-time jobs after they are built and simply running. And across the country, you're starting to see this discussion. You are seeing communities pull away the tax benefits that they've been accruing to data centers because they realize the use of the energy and the use of water, which is another very sparse resource and heavily used by data centers, is simply not worth the kind of jobs and investment that they're getting in those communities. In Oregon, I would say we're sneaking up to that conversation. I ran a bill 2 years ago that would have required data centers in community-owned utility areas, that is much of rural Oregon, to be on the same clean energy path that we are in the IOU parts of the state. That is, we just wanted Amazon or Apple, if they're building a data center, to find energy sources that put that data center toward 80% or 100% clean electricity flowing into it. We got a lot of pushback from people in economic development. The data centers were very successful at aligning rural local government against us as if we were attacking their ability to grow their communities. We since realized that that really was something to talk about, but it wasn't the main issue. The main issue we're heading for right now is just inordinate demand, the tsunami of demand coming from the data centers. So saying that they should have to pay for the costs of their own energy is, I think, the first step toward what needs to be a much broader conversation about the value of that kind of economic development.
Looking at the clock, we have one more. So.
Yeah, the last one. So two quick questions. One, this is probably for Pam Marsh. Well, one is there anything about food waste in the upcoming legislative year that you might think is on tap? And the other question is there a risk that the $197 million that was already awarded by the EPA to the Oregon DEQ, is there a risk that that's going to get pulled back by the federal government?
So last question first. I think money, when checks have been written and are actually out, I don't think you can retract that money. But that is part of the bigger conversation around IRA and Infrastructure Act. And that is why the Biden administration right now is trying to write contracts for a variety of big clean energy installations that are geared up but didn't yet have their money in hand. So we're trying to get that money out as quickly as possible. But I don't think there's a risk to money that's already been allocated and checks have been written. The first question, food waste. The legislative calendar is this. We have all, during this interim, all legislators have been working on their own portfolios of bills we're going to bring forward. If we're committee chairs, we've been working on issues and legislation that our committees will carry forward. But we don't really have any idea what everybody else is doing. So there's a deadline coming up in about 2 weeks when we will have to file our bills. In a couple of weeks after that, every one of the 4,000 bills that's been filed will be public, and we'll find out. I am not currently aware of anyone who is working on the food waste question. That doesn't mean that someone isn't and that there's not a bill out there. So we'll know in January.
One of the Trump-proofing the administration, one of the goals that I didn't mention, Pam just alluded to, and that is encouraging Biden to get all of the IRA funds out before January the 20th, as much as he can. Some of those funds, of course, are geared to 10 years into the future, but get as much of it out as possible. And that's exactly what Pam is talking about.
All right, can we give one last round of applause for our speakers?